So this fear of this void is very strong rather than having this adjustment sort of attitude towards your pain. So oppression, everyone is being oppressed. It's similar, it's familiar. What is freedom? It's just unknown. It cannot ever exist in our life. You know which freedom I'm talking about. I was reading about it in the reservation system that it should be more on the economic grounds, because the people who have already uplifted themselves from an economical perspective, they still keep on using these quotas to just further themselves, because who wouldn't like these benefits even if they are economically superior to a quote unquote a common man. I have seen a lot of examples wherein people whose parents are coming from these reservation systems, the net worth isn't like lakhs and crores, but probably they're still using these systems for their children, putting in the topmost of institutions with a very petty score, if I can use this term. And now they're not even in the country, they're just outside. Whereas the people who are actually suffering in the deepest of the deepest villages and remote sections, they never hear about these benefits and things like that. A lot of outrage culture, wherein people like to take moralistic stance, is often an expression of this, because the people who are like the common men, common people, just like outraging, coming on the social platform to just take off their anger for a minute or two, because they know that in real life they're very powerless. And if you have seen Money Heist, there's a thing in that which is known as the Stockholm syndrome. So if we just extrapolate it, let's call it the system justification syndrome. We have this tendency within us. Yo guys, namaskaram. So back again with another video. So I was researching a lot on propaganda and psychological control as to how propaganda helps one be a slave to the system. But then I thought a little bit deeper. I thought, why not make a video which we are seeing right now, that people just keep on defending systems that hurt them. Now, why is that the case? We have seen a lot of people defending a lot of idiotic systems which are exploiting them outright, justifying rules that suffocates them. And let's say if anyone is also asking a question from the outside, that the way you're living life or the way these things are happening, they just start attacking them in weird ways, the people who are trying to bring in some light. So this is a very weird phenomenon. If you see that you're being hurt and it's visible from a system perspective, rebellion should be natural. But it just does not happen. And even if you read the patterns in history, let's say if we talk about the Nazi thing, if we go to Russia and we talk about the gulags, people just adjust with everything in very weird ways, and then they just start justifying all of that. When people were asked that why they were deleting Jews in the Hitler Germany, then they were very comfortable that okay, this was how it was, the system was such. Jordan Peterson talks a lot about it. He has some good lectures on it. You can also check that out. But anyhow, I think coming back to this video, I just wanted to talk about that the more harmful a system becomes, I've seen this pattern that the more fiercely it is defended. I think one of the core reasons is we attach our identity too much to the system. The moment a system becomes a part of someone's psychological identity, that is, he starts getting a sense of worth from that specific system, logic to that person is irrelevant, because humans are deeply emotional creatures. If you tell people to go by logic, they won't, because this is how we are. People like to appeal to the emotions, and even if you see a lot of salesmen and things like that, they appeal to the emotions of the people. They use selective honesty, which basically means that they'll just throw in some random numbers to just make that point across in which they're rallying up their emotions. But I think in a system perspective, criticizing, let's say even if someone criticizes the system from the onset, it feels to people that they're attacking them on a personal level and a threat to their self-worth. And people just don't want to hear that the way they have lived their life is that of a complete, let's say, quote unquote failure. They know they could have been something much more immense, much more great, but they instead traded for this sort of comfort due to security and whatnot. And when someone is just questioning the system, its flaws, they don't hear that the system is flawed, this thing is not working. What they hear instead is subconsciously that the way you lived your life choices are all meaningless. So they defend, like in a way, themselves through that system. So attack on the system then becomes a personal attack. And then a lot of humans, a lot of us don't want to admit that we were wrong. We suffered for nothing. Someone exploited us. A lot of us keep on just justifying our suffering. Because see, if you start accepting that the system is wrong, then all the people who have been serving them for years, centuries, millennia on end, their grandparents, whatnot, they'll start thinking that their years of obedience were wasted. Let's say a lot of people take pride from a generational level that four generations, five generations of our families are in this specific thing, XYZ. It could be anything across the board. But if we start questioning them, it would feel that their life has been wasted due to this blind obedience to a rotten system. All the sacrifices that they have done were unnecessary, and the more silent they were, the more it enabled harm for a lot of people, because they were the core inner circle, and not a lot of harm was going for them. But from a long term perspective, from an ecological perspective, from a long term positive culture building perspective, a lot of these decisions just harmed all of these things in the long term. So anyone, if they start realizing all of this, it would just devastate them, their sense of identity. And we just like living in sweet lies, just waiting for death to approach us, because the way we are living our life, it's so worthless. We're just surviving. We're just not genuinely living lives. This you see predominant in our country, and I think in a lot of third world countries, with just this sense of passing through the days, not doing a lot of big things and things like that. So humans are wired for choosing the least resistant path, which also means that they want to choose the most easier option available to them. So if the system is flawed, but it is necessary for our day-to-day work and whatnot, it is bad but better than chaos. You hear excuses like this: at least it gives me something. It gives, like, they won't admit that, or even if you're trying to question them, they'll start deflecting all of the responsibilities. So outright becoming defensive, because it's a tool to emotionally survive. If they accept it, they would go into a mess. And there's a very cool phenomena in psychology which is known as the sunk cost fallacy. What this basically means, let's say if you have stayed a year or two into bad relationships or jobs for that matter, you'll stay in that job justifying that I have invested already so much time, I cannot quit now. Instead, taking active consideration of your reality, that since whatever this relationship is, this job is, this has impacted you so much, now I think it's better to just invest your life, the remaining life, into worthwhile pursuits. But this is what just makes us stay in a lot of toxic, bad relationships, jobs, with people, and things like that. If I scale it on a larger level, it looks like the entire population is refusing to question structures that they have invested their lives into. The more someone has sacrificed their time, resources, energy, trading off their dreams to serve this system, trading off their dignity when they were being bullied by corrupt officials and things like that, they took a hit on their dignity, they would still be in that system. So the harder they defend it, you will then just understand that life is so barren that there's just not any other metric to tie your self-worth to. Because if I walk away from any toxic job, any toxic relationship, or any toxic thing for that matter, it would admit that I wasted my life. I gave my life to something that was so toxic and broken. But a lot of people just don't have courage to do that. And also this biases. So you see that the more educated we become, the more we start rationalizing certain things just because we have this stamp of education. A lot of rebellion sometimes comes from people who are just innocent and just want to see things from a fresh perspective. But anyhow, if we start accepting that this void comes within, so this fear of this void is very strong rather than having this adjustment sort of attitude towards your pain. So oppression, everyone is being oppressed, it's similar, it's familiar. What is freedom? It's just unknown. It cannot ever exist in our life. You know which freedom I'm talking about, because if you have been oppressed a lot, you start adjusting to weird realities in your life. And some justifications which you might have seen, that a harmful system at least provides a sort of predictability, a sort of structure to our barren and mundane life, a sort of identity. And most importantly, is it gives us a sense of being socially accepted by the people around. It makes us feel that we have some authority or some power over some other idiots. And humans love to have power over other people, because unfortunately what you see, like in a lot of corporate settings and things like that, if you're working in the corporate sector, you know that how people just want to rip apart each other to increase their authority, title, maybe money at times, to everyone his own accord. But just understanding patterns helps us to get a lot of context in reality and take strategic decisions. But a lot of people won't take a second to just rip you off apart from any other thing. Not a lot of people would say these things, but if you just observe all these things, people with no spine in any facet of their life would just like to dominate in these suits attires, in these safe, weird organizations. So I don't know why that is the thing. But anyhow, coming back to this point. So if you start questioning all of this, all these systems and things like that, if this is wrong, then what replaces it? A lot of work needs to go in that specific thing. Most people just prefer to suffer what is known to them rather than choosing or walking a path that is unknown to them. So it's a classic thing that because freedom is unknown, we'll not take it. You know how people are fearful of their own freedom. So I had just read one quote recently. It was from Acharya Prashant. He was saying that people fear their strength a lot more. So that's why we keep on justifying to ourselves that we ought to live like this with all these bondages and things like that. And then in my previous video, I talked about shame, that how shame is used as this clever, conniving tool to bind people to these systems. Because, see, shame is this subtle psychological tool which just helps people to be locked in rotten systems forever. Once shame is attached to questioning, opting out, being different, then being a part of the system is justified as quote unquote being good, normal, and acceptable. Don't ruffle feathers and all of that. People enforce the system to avoid becoming targets of all these backlash and things like that. And then you have also seen this tendency that the crowd has a tendency to attack people who just are on the outset, making them question these things. Why? Because, again, if I tie back to my previous point, that shame helps build people a controllable mob, which then becomes a crowd. So you might have observed it across societies. It's very consistent that the people who aggressively defend the system, if I have to use the word, the foot soldiers, they are really the people who are in power. They're just like these controllable puppets used by our exploiters. If you see around, you see that these are ordinary people, common citizens, fellow sufferers, or people who are just a level one or two above you, slightly better off. Why? Because the more they keep on suffering, let's say defending the system, they have their weird, fragile story to defend and to tell themselves in their own mind that whatever I'm suffering, this suffering has meaning. Some god XYZ, some past karmic things is the reason I am like this. They'll not just question objectively that a lot of poor people, so take the example of taking this decision in your mind to bring kids to the world. See, it's a conscious choice, but people who are already poor, they know that they themselves cannot sustain themselves. It just doesn't make sense to bring children, but still they do, thinking that they'll fix them of their suffering. And when these children are grown up in these households, what's the standard scripts that they're told? Oh, it's because of past karmas. It's because God meant things to be like this and things like that. So we like delegating responsibilities of our suffering to some unknown entity because it feels easier. Taking responsibility is hard because then you start becoming accountable for your own decisions, choices, and actions. And not a lot of people like accountability, like the crab mentality. People just keep on defending whatever shit they are into, and they would just die with that shit. Classic blue pill mindset. And these people also use this thing. Let's say if I talk about the common people, the middle class people, there's a lot of virtue signaling slash morality which is used as a shield, because if you start questioning, you'll always hear things like be a good boy, be a good girl, don't question our elders. You see how morality is often weaponized as a shield. It's not to reduce harm, but just keep on justifying the shit that we're living in. Phrases like this is how the world works, not everyone can succeed, and all those things, like they would sound good on paper, but the core reason as to why they are being said is just because a person, it could be a parents, it could be the boomer uncles, aunties, and whatnot, they're just getting defensive and they just want to function defensively. A lot of outrage culture wherein people like to take moralistic stance is often an expression of this, because the people who are like the common men, common people, just like outraging, coming on the social platform to just take off their anger for a minute or two, because they know that in real life they're very powerless. And if you have seen Money Heist, there's a thing in that which is known as the Stockholm syndrome. So if we just extrapolate it, let's call it the system justification syndrome. We have this tendency within us to rationalize whatever shit we want to, even when they harm us, because subconsciously we still believe that the system is fair enough, and it just helps us reduce anxiety. A lot of outrage also exists from that tangent that there would be some justice that would be delivered to us. But if you see the actual ground reality, you see that sometimes People just keep on fighting for 10 years, 20 years, decades on end, and they won't get any justice. I was just checking out a reel. It was by Mr. Mish Agarwal. So he's a lawyer and he has a good YouTube channel. He had also fought the case of Mr. Sarabjit Singh, who was falsely implicated in a case in Delhi. So there was a reel where he mentioned that it's all the most best to just settle outside court rather than settling inside court, because there's like not a lot of trust. So this is coming from one of the topmost lawyers of the country. You can see how unjust it is, but then we're just like numbing ourselves for weird reasons. Because see, if we start accepting that the system is unjust, the scripts that we have been fed from school, that the world is fair, you work hard, you'll succeed, and all of that bullshit, none of that makes sense in the real world. If we start accepting that the system is unjust, we'll start accepting that the world is unstable, cruel, narcissists, psychopaths go on the top. Study across history. There are just a few people who can be counted on your fist who did some positive value contribution to the world. If I talk about the Buddhas, the Krishnas, and the Jesuses of the world. But if I start talking about exploiters, crusaders, people who have treated other people to get power over them, their number exceeds a lot. Do you think that these people were, let's say, if I have to use the politically correct statement, morally stable and all of that? Like our DNA is that of hunter gatherer, predators. These people just channeled that predator energy. Right now, all of it is very subtle, because if you start going into all of these things explicitly, it's a bloody crime. You'll be behind bars. But that just does not take away from the fact that these tendencies still exist within us, and they just find expression subtly. So this is how it is. Probably the sense of safety is an illusion, because you're just a number, you're just a statistic for the people in power. The moment, unfortunately, something bad happens to you, or you're just deleted from the world due to natural calamity and things like that, you'll just be a number. No one would care about your life. There would be condolences from a media perspective, but every one of us just moves on with our life because life is happening. This is how, unfortunately, the world is. This is how the center of the world is. Though some people are still fighting in very positive ways. I'm not denying that, but it's always better to just have these realities in mind. But anyhow, coming back to the point, one more reason that these people, they start seeing this authority as the be all and end all of their life, and then it provides a sort of psychological relief for them. Authority answers uncomfortable questions for you. What is right? What is acceptable? What is success? And all of that bullshit. But defending authority, because they have been chosen in this authority, they might have some talent, capability, and whatnot. It's easier than carrying individual responsibility, whereas we know how authority technically is. It's just made of Homo sapiens. Let's say people who have cleared certain exams, like a lot of systems. A lot of our exams don't measure genuine competence. A lot of our exams are just working on some weird ways, because there's always that debate. I was reading about it in the reservation system, that it should be more on the economic grounds, because the people who have already uplifted themselves from an economical perspective, they still keep on using these quotas to just further themselves. Because who wouldn't like these benefits, even if they are economically superior to a quote unquote a common man? I have seen a lot of examples wherein people whose parents' birth are coming from these reservation systems, their net worth isn't like lakhs and crores, but probably they're still using these systems for their children, studying in the topmost of institutions with a very petty score, if I can use this term. And now they're not even in the country, they're just outside. Whereas the people who are actually suffering in the deepest of the deepest villages and remotest sections, they never hear about these benefits and things like that. So, like, a lot of weird realities exist, but probably this is how things are. And then I also see that there's this thing that education can fix all of this. But you know what education does? Anyone can get a degree, any degree for that matter. But it's more of an internal education that is really needed, because education without a sort of inner autonomy, without a sort of inner rebelliousness, it just creates better justifications. We won't aim for freedom, because to require genuine freedom in life requires a completely different bent of mind. It's like saying that we'll have the best of the bestest suits, but still we would not change the animal that we are from within. So this is how a lot of quote unquote education does right now. We like to polish things from the outside rather than just thinking things, doing a sort of inner work. That requires a lot of different paths and different sort of approach towards things. And then you see that a subtle sort of fear is also inculcated. It just subtly replaced. We can just tie it to the shame point itself, that it just subtly replaces the outright violence. See, modern systems learn something crucial, that you don't need brutality if fear is internalized in people. So control has shifted from physical punishment to reputation damage, you're socially excluded, or maybe a sort of economic insecurity. Because think of it, like in earlier times, people who went or walked a different path, they were publicly deleted. There was this king sitting and they were like publicly bashed, deleted. So message was being sent that if you start walking a different path, this is what would happen to you. But all of that has now shifted to subtle things, the same metrics. Let's see, you will be socially excluded, reputation damage, and all of that, which I talked about. This is exactly, I had talked about a book in my previous video, the 1984 George Orwellian dystopian reality. This is what it is here, wherein control is psychological, not physical per se. Backed by all of this, you see that a lot of people keep on defending the system like it's maturity, like you have matured in some weird ways, wherein you have just become part of the brutal realities that exist. A lot of people just keep on submitting, often reframing it as wisdom, that this is just how life is, grow up, be realistic, and all of that. So there's a thing in psychology which is known as shifting the frame of control. They just do it in a weird way that just hurts them. This reframing shames idealism and rewards resignation, that you just stay like this, don't ruffle a lot of feathers and things like that. People don't genuinely become mature, they become emotionally tired, weak in the long term, and they just keep on shooting themselves on the foot. Now what's the personal cost? You all have seen it, but let me just lay it out for you. You see boomer uncles all around you, people having this sort of cynicism, a sort of numbness to their emotions, not having any spark for life, loss of vitality, and quite resentment towards people who are wanting to build something, change something. Why? Because admitting the truth feels worse, but doubling down on these negative qualities feel easier. Now, what can we do as people? So, I'm not telling you to pick up arms and things like that, but probably on an internal level, a sort of separation is needed, that you don't attach your self-worth to a lot of these things. Because see, it would not, and can just talk about individual freedom, it cannot happen with overthrowing any system in a specific day. It starts with, first of all, just separating your sense of identity. Because once you start separating your identity, you can just start taking decisions which can bring you freedom from a long-term perspective. The marriage metrics and all of that, it's also a weird system which just ties people down. So you see, all this ecosystem is created so that you can just be a slave to the system. Even from a tax perspective, you see that if you're married, probably there are like a lot more tax breaks from family insurance and these kind of things as compared to when you're just a vagabond sort of person, an individual single person. But anyhow, that's a separate video. So seeing objectively the system without becoming it, and refusing to fuse your self-identity with this sort of obedience is probably the way to go. Because my channel is just focused on individual freedom and how you can become an individually critically nuanced thinker, not here to rally up people, outrage, and all of that bullshit things. Because the more inner education one has, the more one then just starts taking decisions which are good for them in the long run. Most people never do this. They're very comfortable with the lies that they tell themselves, accepting this sort of weird comfort and uncertainty, and always just distancing people who bring a shimmer of hope, bring a shimmer of truth towards them. But anyhow, that's precisely why a lot of bullshit systems keep on existing. You let me know what your opinions and thoughts are from this video. In the next video, I'll talk about fear as to how I talked about shame. That can be a very good topic. But anyhow, what are your learnings? Use this comment section as a diary entry, that what weaknesses have you broken, how are you breaking your bondages, your limitations, and moving into this life of freedom per se. Because the more free you are, the more happier you are. Humans are just not made for being collared workers, having this obedience sort of thing. Every one of us wants freedom on an individual level, but that's again a different discussion. But anyhow, let me know what you feel about it. If you feel like having a one-on-one consultation call with me on issues you might be struggling with, or just reflective session, someone to hear you out, help you fix your mess, feel free to book a call with, reach out to me via any email. I'll talk to you in the next video. So until then, this is Debu Ki Dastak from Debu Ki Dastak signing off. Cheers, you stay awesome.